Hey guys, we're back. This is Riders of the Dawn. This is Stu.
This is Jay.
And today we're going to talk about Lord of the Rings. Not just the books, but the movies. That is, we're going to be talking about how the adaptation of the movies, the trilogy made by Peter Jackson back in the early 2000s, how that worked and how it possibly didn't work. What was good and what was possibly sucky about it.
And I'm sure at some point we're going to get off topic and we're going to talk about The Hobbit also.
I really want to save that one for a different video. Because whenever something sucks, there's so much more to say about it than if it doesn't suck. So, I don't know. Where do we want to start with?
So, well, let's start with the first movie. Let's start with Fellowship.
Yeah, so Fellowship of the Ring as an adaptation. So, yeah, if we look at the first book, Fellowship of the Ring. Fellowship of the Ring was a really good book, and if you're going to look at the three books, and actually before we even dig into this, Tolkien didn't want to volumize Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
He wanted to release Lord of the Rings as one book because he wrote it as one book, and he called it the overgrown sequel to The Hobbit. But publishers obviously didn't want to. Hey, you don't want to release one 500,000, 600,000 word book as a single book. He actually wanted it in one volume, I think, with the Silmarillion, which would be
a tome of such epic proportion.
It'd be like biblical.
Yeah.
It'd be like biblical in terms of size. So what they did is they broke it into three books, and they even named him things he didn't want to name them. So he didn't want to name the third book specifically. He didn't want to name it Return of the King because he thought they gave away the ending.
Right.
He wanted to call it like the War of the Ring, I think. It was originally called like Return of the Shadow. I don't remember what the Treason of Isengard and like War of the Ring. I think was like the original titles that he worked with. Anyway.
Well, so that's what's interesting about that is in modern publishing, that's still the case. Mm-hmm. All indie publishers really want to release shorter volumes because
that's how you drive more sales.
Yeah, you can drive more sales, and we've talked about this a lot. Is you have to be an artist and an entrepreneur if you're in indie publishing. So you have to be very aware of those publishing trends and figuring those kind of things out, which we talk about.
Yeah. So for Tolkien's publishers, if you release it as three books, the printing costs aren't that much more for three books, but you can sell each of those three books at a bigger profit margin, which is going to be better for you in the long run. So, yeah, that's worth noting. And yeah, indie publishers, what they tend to do is you put out like your first volume for free or really low cost, like 99 cents free, and then you sell a bunch of sequels once people get into a series. Series are really big right now, and they did exist before Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. They just didn't exist quite as. There wasn't as much push to have a series of novels about the same characters. And
I don't see that trend going away.
Yeah. If you've ever heard of like Last of the Mohicans, that was part of a James Fenimore Cooper's Leatherstocking Tales, all about Natty Bumppo, one particular character that the books take place at different times in colonial America. So there was a series there. Great example of an early novel series, whether you like James Fenimore Cooper or not. I tend to like him. But
first movie. So
okay.
My thoughts. I'm going to assume that everyone's seen the movies or read the books or both, like we have. And I will say that. Do we want to start positives or negatives?
Let's start with positives.
So I love how it begins. It's very true to the book. I love Bilbo's little birthday speech.
And Bilbo is very Bilbo
in
that book. It's a very good representation of who I think Bilbo is.
Yeah.
He's a jovial guy. He doesn't take things too seriously. But he's got a darkness in his heart from this ring.
Yeah.
From having this ring for so long. Yeah. I think visually it looks great.
Visually it's fantastic. I love the landscape of the Shire. I think he really pegged the Hobbit holes, the big round doors, and Gandalf has to duck to get in. I thought it was visually stunning. Visually stunning. When we get past that, we were just making a joke when we got in the car about what's the Elvish word for friend?
It's like they have these great little comic relief moments, which are in the book, but they really sell them hard in the movie, and they do a really good job with them.
And one thing that we talked about with the Dark Tower when we did our book to movie analysis of that was they used a lot of quotes from the book in dialogue to make sure that it keyed into the reader audience.
Yeah, and not just that, but the quotes are really good.
Yeah.
Now, when they wrote the dialogue, they were pretty careful with the hobbits to give the hobbits the sort of country accent that they have in the book. In the book, the hobbits talk a lot like us.
Yeah.
You know, they have their little country guys. They talk like rural Englishmen, and that's intentional because Tolkien wanted to create this sort of merry old England sense to the Shire. So when the characters leave the Shire, it's like they're leaving this comfortable, quaint place and going into, horrible danger.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of that. And so they were really, really careful to make sure that was in the book as well. But they casualized some of the other dialogue. So some of the dialogue that Gimli had, Gimli spoke with a more formal sort of manner to him in the book. Aragorn spoke with a little more formal manner. And most of the characters spoke in a slightly different kind of set of language. But sometimes you have to make that alteration because you're making the movie for a modern audience that probably hasn't read the books. And if they don't like kind of really formal speech that Tolkien used,
it can turn them off.
It could turn them off. So I really felt like they treaded the line quite carefully, quite well.
Mm-hmm.
They did a really, really good job with it.
Yeah, they had good tension and release points for a film. My one complaint, especially about the first one, was the pacing. I really felt like Fellowship of the Ring moved too quickly.
Yes, I felt that way as well. And especially when you compare it to the book, they cut a lot of stuff out from the book.
Yeah.
So the book had just a lot more story of them in the Shire and getting out of the Shire and escaping the Dark Riders initially.
Yeah.
What you have in the movie is like, we have to go, and they just leave. And the Dark Riders are following them, and then they make it to Bree, and they're safe.
Yeah.
But in the book, getting to Bree is like 8 chapters. There's so much they do, which really not only like kind of heightened the tension, it really made you understand how far they were traveling. Bree is far away from the Shire, fairly far. It's more than like more than a couple days journey, and then it also just keyed into the adventure.
Yeah.
The adventure of the book. The Fellowship of the Ring is a book. It's really about adventure. It's about going to different fantastic places and experiencing what they have. Kind of in the same vein as The Hobbit. The Hobbit is a classic adventure story in a fantasy setting, and it really kicks ass at that. And so does Fellowship.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that the pacing felt off. It felt too quick. But of course, I think you have to tell the story.
Yeah, you have to tell the story that is
possible
is making to it's really pushing the arc. So they cut all this stuff about them going and meeting Tom Bombadil and fighting this necromancer.
Yeah,
and that makes sense that they cut that. And that really wasn't that part specifically. I don't really have issue with them cutting that. It's just it felt so fast.
They didn't have them go through the old forest at all.
Yeah.
Which would have been very spooky and cool to do. Like it felt like they needed at least 1 or 2 extra scenes of travel, because you kind of get these. They have like a montage where they're like walking through the fields, and Sam's like, "This is the farthest away I've ever walked."
But it feels like it's been like an afternoon.
Yeah.
It's like suddenly I just think Sam's kind of lazy.
Yeah, I think Sam might be lazy.
Which he's not.
And in the book, there's this whole thing like Frodo sells Bag End and moves to Crick Hollow, and there's a conspiracy to help him escape with the ring. 20 years pass between Bilbo's birthday and when Frodo leaves in the book. It's those details aren't that important, but they just would have, having a couple of them included would have added a little bit to the pacing at the expense of maybe 1 to 2 scenes. So 5 minutes of screen time, I think, would have improved the pacing quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, and then of course they had the extended versions, which they don't add those things.
They still don't add them. They add them
in different places.
They add them in like the third act and the second act, which is...
which I thought the pacing in that part was great. It was really the beginning that the pacing was just like, whoa.
So I agree with that. There's also a couple of cringe moments. There's some cringe. I'm going to give you 2 cringe moments. You tell me if you cringed as well. I cringed when I first watched it, and it's still like I have to accept that that's I don't know what Peter Jackson was thinking. So there's this part where like they're running away with, after Frodo's stabbed on Weathertop, they're like running away with him, and they have Arwen save them rather than Glorfindel. Glorfindel I don't think he's even in the movies, or if he is, like, nobody refers to him by name.
Right.
I think he might be one of the elves that they kill in the second movie. It's just like, they're like, oh, you liked this guy, and now let's kill him. It was kind of like one of those emotional release things. So they have her save Frodo by, like, having the river, like, knock over the Nazgul. And I'm not convinced she's powerful enough to do that, because in the book it was like, oh, Glorfindel's a high elf. He's from the Undying Lands. He's one of these few Noldor that remains. And, they're wondering in the book, like, should we give Glorfindel the ring? Because he could survive in Mordor, and he could do it. It's like, and they're like, no, we can't, because it's not, even with him, there's no hope of, like, entering Mordor with force. We can only do it with secrecy. Yeah. Even with this high elven lore,
well, and it also it skews this idea that, like, suddenly all elves are that powerful.
Yeah.
And but Legolas isn't that powerful.
Clearly isn't.
He's an awesome bow shot, and he dances on top of unpacked snow. Like, that's cool, but he doesn't, like, surge raging rivers to destroy supernatural evil beings.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, well, if Arwen can do that, why is it Arwen walking around with Gandalf as, like, the extra? Yeah. Why don't we just send a bunch of mages along with him?
Yeah.
And all that's explained in the book, but I thought that was a cringy moment because of the way Liv Tyler acted it. It was, like, so serious, and like she's, like, half crying as she does it, and I don't know, just seeing a woman with her acting in that part, in that particular scene, I was just like, oh.
But you know what? We differ in this part, because Liv Tyler was a childhood crush of mine.
Oh, I don't dislike Liv Tyler, but her acting style in that scene was like a cringe, and that's another thing that they, so there's a bunch of things they did when they adapted the movie. So they cut a bunch of material, because you have to make a movie, and movies have a really, really strict format. Even Lord of the Rings, that was 3 hours long. You have to get this sort of story arc thing happening. At the end of Fellowship of the Ring, they had to conjure up a conclusive feeling to the story. And they did that with a sword fight. And that was effective. I mean, it was kind of shoehorned in there, but it was mostly effective. But Arwen is, like, not really in the Lord of the Rings main sequence of the book.
Yeah.
She's part of, like, an appendix in the book. And that's because Tolkien didn't want to write a love story.
Yeah.
And he didn't. So, but for audiences, it's like, well, we got to have a love story.
Especially modern audiences.
With modern audiences, they put in... Now, the love triangle actually was in the books with when we talk about the second movie. I think we're probably only going to talk about the first movie.
Yeah, that's where we are.
That's where we're at right now. It's okay. Well, it's cool. So they had to give Arwen more screen time, so that's why they put her in that scene. Yeah. It's because we wanted to like her. It's like I could probably think of different things that would have made her more likable. And if they didn't want to deal with, like, having to explain Glorfindel, they could have had Elrond put it.
Yeah.
Because we already know that Elrond's, like, epically powerful and has a ring of power. and is super, super old because there's like this revelation. They do this great revelation where it was like, I was there 10,000 years ago when this happened.
Okay, I have to interject because we almost talked about The Matrix today. And talking about cringe moments, when Elrond came on screen, all I could think was Mr. Anderson. Like, I couldn't see him for the powerful high elf he was because all I saw was Agent Smith.
He was great as Agent Smith.
He was.
Those movies would have sucked without him in it.
Honestly, like no disrespect to Keanu, but like
I thought Keanu Reeves was actually really great in his part. Like, it was a part that he did perfectly. In my opinion.
Yeah, but Agent Smith, like, he was so good, and I feel I don't even know the name of the actor.
Hugo Weaving.
He's
great.
He's great, but when I saw Lord of the Rings, all I saw was Agent Smith, and it's just not fair to that guy's career because he played the part really well.
True facts, true stories. I didn't realize it was him until like way late in the movie, and I'm like,
really?
Oh wait, and that's the guy from The Matrix because I thought his performance was really convincing.
I couldn't unsee it. And it's like, I agree. I thought his performance was great, but I couldn't get past it. It took me like my 10th view of the first movie before I could really just see him as Elrond.
Yeah, I could see that. but yeah, so they had to kind of shoehorn in. They had to give Liv Tyler more screen time so that you could be committed to this love relationship, and that's going to make the love triangle in the second movie more effective. What they also shoehorned in was this orc. They had to create a villain for Aragorn to fight at the end.
Yeah.
And so they created this orc. I think he has a name, but I don't remember his name ever being mentioned in the movies.
Yeah, I don't think they name him in the movie.
So he's an orc. You see orcs being born out of muck in Isengard, which was really weird. It was effective in a sense because it's like, that they're like twisted magic creatures, but it's like, wait, I don't think that's how they're actually born. I think they're born the way normal beings are born.
Really?
Yeah, because they multiply on their own. They clearly are able to reproduce on their own.
But I think that was the reason that was effective was because
just kind of showed how twisted Saruman was. I think it was effective.
Yeah, because you want to see Sauron as a divine being, like creating his own creatures.
Yeah, that's true. It does work in that.
So it's like it's not really true to the book, but that was how the first orcs were created.
And then there's a great bit of exposition where like Saruman tells the orc, did you know how orcs were created? They were created from tortured elves, which is something that Morgoth did. He created the orcs from torturing and twisting the elves into a different life form that more suited his purposes. And it was a really good piece of exposition. I thought Christopher Lee was phenomenal it revived his career and made people pay attention to him because he was so effective at it.
Yeah, he
was such a frightening and sickening creature. And then you got to see him in all these other movies, and you realize like what a good actor he really, really was.
Yeah.
And his voice made it because in the books they talk about the voice of Saruman, and the voice of Saruman was so powerful, and then you hear Christopher Lee's voice, and it is a powerful voice.
It was so powerful that at 80 years old, he started recording metal records.
No, and 90 years old, he started doing metal records. He was a trained opera singer, too.
Yeah.
Fun fact, you can find it on YouTube. There, he did the audiobook for The Children of Húrin, which is a J.R.R. Tolkien book, and he's a very good narrator as well. He worked with Rhapsody of Fire. He worked with Manowar, too, I think.
Right.
I think he did stuff with Manowar as well. I think he did the re-recording of Battle Hymns, one of those things. He had a great voice, and I think the voice really made the part. Anyway, they conjured up this orc, and just sort of we only see him when it's time to fight. So we have Boromir sort of die his tragic death, and that's actually was a great sort of plot point to end on. Was this dark moment. So it had the Empire Strikes Back ending in the first movie with which was great. And
really was,
then we gave the audience some satisfaction. We had Aragorn kill an orc.
Yeah.
So what they probably decided is like, we need a little bit stronger resolution. They're like, let's have Aragorn battle like the orc captain and kill him.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, how do we make the audience commit to the orc captain? It's like, well, let's go backwards and have these scenes. And all the scenes have multiple purposes. Like, you see him being born, you see Saruman being like, who do you serve? Saruman.
Yeah.
And it's like, then he tells him about the elves, or being twisted into orcs, and it gives you a great bit of exposition.
Yeah, really effective.
Yeah, it's wedged in there, but it's wedged in there for, I think, pretty good cinematic reasons. Other cringe moment, I forgot to mention the other one. There's a part where, like, Frodo offers the ring to Galadriel. And I thought, by the way, like, Lothlorien looked beautiful. I thought it was a really, really well done set piece. I don't know. Kate Blanchett was good as Galadriel. She worked. She was like very over the top with it, but I think it worked. And so there's a part where like he wants to hand her the ring, and then there's all these like special effects from, like, they invert the colors, since it's the color negative. And they put a ring modulator on her voice. They're like, let's make her voice sound weird. They're like, how about a ring modulator? And they're like, well, that sounds weird. I'm like, it sounds stupid. It's what it sounds like. It ends up just being like this cringy moment where it's like you're watching some Star Trek episode from the 60s, as far as like what effects they're putting on. It's probably better than that, but maybe for the 70s.
I thought the visual effects were effective.
It's just like the sound of it, and then like her hair is flying everywhere. Oh, be a queen! And there's like this like ring. What a ring modulator does is it modulates the pitch of your voice up and down by a certain amount, so that you have this effect going on as you speak, rather than just going up and down. One goes up, one goes down. It creates a really weird effect. We used to use ring modulators for like analog keyboards and stuff back in the day. So they just put that on her voice, and it's just, God, it made me cringe. Just that effect. The ring modulator. They're like, we should put a ring modulator on. It's just like, veto that idea. That is going to sound really cheesy, and it did. So anyway, I think we're out of time for this particular one.
Yeah. Well, so Fellowship of the Rings.
So I like the movie.
I definitely liked it.
I don't think it's the best of them.
No.
And I wish that they had a better first act.
Yes.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have more exposition at the beginning of the first act in the extended edition, but not in that critical area where they're traveling to Bree. Yeah. So you feel like things just get a little faster. You're like, well, Bree is just in the Shire. It's like, no.
Yeah.
We really need to get the sense that they've escaped and journeyed on their own for a certain amount of distance before.
And they've already had some growth, really, which you don't see in the movie. It's just like...
So in the book, they get to Bree, and then they come up against their limitation. They have to be helped through that limitation by Aragorn. And then, it's all about how they need help through their limitations, and then at the end they have enough of a growth cycle that they can complete it on their own. That they've grown. Anyway, so I think that's about it. You can find me at davidvstewart.com, dvspress.com.
You can find me at matthewjwellman.com.
And we'll see you next time.
Later.